Hi everyone, so this is OCD Live. I'm Ali Greymond, and let's get started with some questions. Okay, so I received a few questions here. Let's go over them one by one. First question is talking about the difference between a real life event and a false memory OCD, and what is the difference, and is it possible to also mix up the two? So, mix up a real event with things that never happened. So, first of all, about comparing the two events, the real life event and false memory event. What I see most of the time is that the person will have a mix of the two. So, it will start out as a real event and will be turned into something else. Sometimes I see a completely made up event, but that's rare. Usually I see the mix up of the two where, for example, the person is driving. I always go with the driving OCD because it's kind of like the easiest one to explain to people who have a different type of OCD, I find. So, um, the person is driving, they think they hit something, and they worry, okay, well, what if I hit a person? What if I caused harm? All of this stuff, right? So, but they are driving, and the driving part is real. Just the fact that they think that they hit a bump and that means they hit a person, that part is not real. But the part of, them thinking of whether they're driving or not, that's obviously real. They are for real driving. Same thing if a person sees blood somewhere and worries that it's like AIDS or HIV or something like that, right? Again, yes, there's a red spot there. It doesn't mean that it's blood. It definitely doesn't mean that it's blood which has AIDS, which you could get AIDS from, right? So there is a real event usually attached to it, but it's not what you think it is. So that's what I find usually happens. Sometimes you can create, especially if it was a long time ago, so say a fear about something happening in the past, but way in the past. Sometimes you will be in a situation where you might think something is something happened when where it didn't. So, well, I remember being at this and this place, but you might have not even been there. Or I remember again, and the second part of the question was um, is it possible to mix up real event? Yeah, okay, so yeah, so it is definitely possible, and it's actually more likely to mix up the two events rather than not. So so yeah, definitely possible, definitely likely, and it's really nothing that you should concern yourself with because I mean, in the way of is this OCD or not? If it feels like OCD, then it means it is OCD. Just really kind of use it as your like go-to thought that if I'm worried about this as possibly being OCD, that means that it is OCD, and that means that I absolutely have to move on. Okay. Okay, so next question. If you visualize what you could have been thinking at the time. Oh, okay. So the person's asking, like, if you visualize what you could have been thinking at the time, but in doubt, is this a trait of false memory OCD? Yeah, because if you're creating a false situation with false events and or some of it was false anyways, you can if you keep going, and this is why I always say stop the reassurance, stop analyzing. I know from personal experience how difficult it is to stop analyzing when you're in the grips of OCD. But you really, really have to stop because the more you analyze, the more deeper you pull yourself in, the more of these thoughts you're going to get. So you can get, well, I was feeling this way. Well, I thought this. Well, I remember this. Well, I smelled this. You can have all kinds of sensations that seem real because the event was so long ago, or even sometimes not that long ago. It just depends on how your specific brain works with that and what kind of thoughts you get. But when it's something in the past, you can come up with any additional stuff. I had situations myself when just, a few days later, I would have a thought of, oh, what really happened a few days ago, and worrying about it and creating false additional thoughts that made me more paranoid and more trying to get reassurance, right? So you really just, you should not go there. You should not let yourself get into that mental space. And I know it's hard, and I know you feel like, well, I have to check, I can't live with uncertainty. But if you check, you're gonna try to convince yourself of more details, and that's even more uncertainty, you know. And same when you avoid, you're avoiding, so you're creating a more scary situation for yourself, because you're basically telling your mind that you're scared. So I'm just kind of throwing that in there, that avoidance is not better than reassurance. But yeah, definitely, when you are doing the reassurance like this, um I mean, it's only going to get worse, So really kind of pull back and, yeah, I thought this, yeah, I thought that, okay, or I possibly could have thought that. I don't care, I'm moving on. And as you start to emotionally detach from it, everything, I promise you, honestly, that everything will start to make sense. So all of these thoughts that you thought, well, what if I thought this? What if this happened? Um, all of these like additional things to the OCD that kind of, you think, well, because I thought this, maybe that makes the OCD thought true or something like that. All of this will fall away, I promise you. And I know, people say, well, don't make these kind of blanket statements, but it's honestly, I always see the same thing. And it was the same thing with me, that as soon as you emotionally detach from it, a day, 2 days later, you start to see things rationally. You stop being scared by the thought, and you see it for what it really is, and which is nothing. There's no reason to worry, no reason to panic. It's just a thought. And when you see it that way, you start to put these thoughts in perspective, and these additional things that you thought, well, what if that, what if this, they just kind of fall away by the wayside. So okay, so another set of questions I have here is, and again, I'm assuming this is about, it is about false memory OCD as well. That if you visualize what you could have been thinking at the time, but in doubt, is this a trait of false memory OCD? Yeah, and again, this is a trait of false memory OCD. Also, can OCD make you believe you thought something in the past? You can remember thinking something, but in doubt. Yeah, okay, we already went over this. And then, oh, okay, here. And another question I had, reinterpret memories to fit your current OCD fear. Yeah, so because you may have had a situation that happened. It wasn't a scary situation, but it was a situation that you attached OCD to. And now you're reinterpreting those memories of that situation, exactly what you said, to fit your current fear. Because your mind right now is on the lookout for anything that has to do with your OCD theme. So the more you pay attention to it, the more you analyze, the more you get reassurance, the more focused it becomes. And again, just like I was saying in my previous shows, that the example of the bear in the woods, that you go into the woods the first time, you see a bear, you run away, you get scared and run away. Your brain takes notice of that, and as soon as you go into woods or even a wooded area or anywhere there's trees, you're gonna worry that there is a bear there. And it's the same exact thing. And your mind is gonna think, well, what if this shrub is a bear? What if that tree is a bear? What if I see something crawling there? It's gonna give you all of these additional thoughts. Just like with this. See, the mind mechanism doesn't understand OCD, so it works the same with real thoughts and OCD thoughts, but that's a problem because it's sending you false thoughts, basically. It just doesn't understand that it's doing that. So with these types of thoughts, you just really have to put it in perspective that this is the type of OCD you have all the time. This is your regular theme. It's not scary. There is nothing new here. It's just a similar type of thought, but it just in a slightly new way. And the more you pay attention to this type of thought, the worse the situation is going to get. So under no circumstances can you kind of let go of it, or like pay attention to it or like that. Just let it go. And I know it's hard, but the thing is, it's like you just have to power through. this moment right now. Don't worry about, I can't let it go for the rest of the day. I can't let it go for a few hours. Okay, can you let it go for this minute? Or say next 5 minutes. Next 5 minutes, you get busy, you're not thinking about this. And then 5 more minutes, and then keep adding to it, because every time you let go, you lose a little bit of the emotional attachment to it, and you gain a little bit of power back. Okay, I have another question here. My question is, when I get, just a second here. Okay, so the question is that when the mind is stressed, wire power to fight OCD gets reduced. And that's why, because you're stressed, because your mind has already been focused on so many things. And when your mind is focused on so many different things, and especially in real life stress situations, it's not able to deal with OCD as it should. And you're more easily kind of swayed into the avoidance or reassurance behaviors. So you really have to kind of afterwards dig yourself out of them, and it becomes a problem. So I would say, if it's planned stress, like if you're in a stressful situation, but it's like you knew you were gonna be, like, for example, you're moving, or there's holiday season, or something is changing in your life, but a planned change, prepare that your OCD is gonna get worse. And by preparing yourself, like setting, kind of thinking to yourself, like, okay, I know I'm gonna feel a little bit worse, but I'm gonna power through. I'm not gonna let it get me. And I know these thoughts are gonna come in, but I'm not gonna pay attention to them. You know, getting yourself into that mindset before the stress. If you are in a stressful situation already, again, saying, I know I'm stressed, the OCD is worse right now because I'm stressed. I am gonna really pay attention to not only my stress stuff, but OCD, and really make sure I'm not doing anything wrong, because that's kind of the bottom line. Stressed or not, the reason why OCD feels worse is because you're doing reassurance. It's just easier to do reassurance when you are stressed, because you're just, your mind is elsewhere, you're not really watching, and sometimes it's easier just to kind of feel good for a minute, get the reassurance done, and move on. But it's just not the right thing to do. It really makes the situation worse in the long run. And then next time the stressful situation comes, you're going to be even more in the grips of OCD. So my suggestion for the stress is, and again, try to reduce it as much as possible. Right now you're getting over OCD, so that doesn't mean that you should be moving mountains at the same time. Cut down your stress to a minimum, deal with what you need to deal, but don't take on any more, and really focus on not paying attention to OCD. The good thing is, since you're trying to not pay attention to OCD, there's not actually any extra work involved in that. All the work is all the work has to do with actually doing other things. So it falls right into you taking care of your real life stuff. But again, just don't stress yourself too much over it, because then your mind starts to get overwhelmed. And another thing is, during stressful time, is rest is at the paramount importance. You need to rest as much as you possibly can, so you start to really feel better. Because your mind needs some time to relax. So whenever it can have that, I mean, that's the only time it can have to rest from stress, from OCD, from everything. So also, I find that meditation will really kind of help with everything, really put it in perspective for you. So, and again, just watch that reassurance, especially self-reassurance, analyzing. All of this has to stop. Like, I get asked again and again, can I get over OCD without stopping reassurance? And the answer is no. No, you can't get over OCD without stopping reassurance fully. So you can stop it kind of, slowly, or you can stop it all at once. But you are going to have to either way stop it, because you can't keep going like this. I mean, reassurance is done to ensure that the feared situation is not true, and to protect yourself. And you can't both say that OCD is not true, but yet I'm going to protect myself, So they're the opposite behaviors. So really I would suggest to you to make a list of all of the avoidance, reassurance, and compulsion behaviors that you have. Make 3 different lists just to kind of keep them separate and see what out of that list you can cut out right now. So stuff that's not very kind of significant to you, but you do that anyways. So out of your avoidance, what is the thing that you're avoiding that's like kind of the least severe, where you don't really have to avoid it, but you kind of do anyway? What is that thing? You know, same thing from the compulsion. What if you have a compulsion? For example, you're washing your hands a certain for a long time, right? See if you can cut that down. So from 20 minutes to say 18 minutes. What's the difference of 2 minutes, right? And then keep going at 18 minutes. Then cut it down more to say 15 minutes, So you're slowly cutting down the process. Same thing that if you're checking something, if you're checking, I don't know, the stove, for example, that's a very common thought, right? That if you're checking 10 times, see if you can only check 3 times or 4 times. And in the beginning, you will get a lot of anxiety when you do these things, when you change how you're operating. But, this is another thing that I see often too, that the anxiety is, becomes a situation where the person will be unwilling to do the recovery work because they get anxiety. And this happens a lot because the person thinks that, well, if I'm getting anxiety, that's not good. It isn't good in a way that you feel bad, but at the same time, it's good in a way that this is the start of the recovery, because your brain wrongfully thinks that you are in danger. Just like I said with the bear example, that your brain wrongfully thinks there is a bear, So now we have to untrain it, and untraining is never easy, Untraining means saying to like in the bear example, right? Going into the forest and saying, see, there is no bear. And as you walk into the forest, you're going to get all kinds of thoughts, and your anxiety is going to skyrocket because your brain thinks you're about to die, basically, right? So it is training the dragon, so to speak, right? So you have to just power through that first time. And after a while, your brain will start to understand that there's nothing to fear here. This is a normal situation and you can let go of it. But until it really understands it, until it gets it, it's going to be a little bit difficult for you. So, just kind of take it easy. Don't allow the stress to get to you. Don't allow the thoughts to get to you. View them as a separate person, see the thought coming in and out of your head, but don't engage it. So it's coming in one ear, it's staying in your head, it's coming out the other ear. You don't have to stop that process and hold the thought there. It's like what we talked about, catching the ball and running with it. The ball is just being thrown. It's not being thrown for you to catch. You catching and running with it, that's all you're doing, you're choosing to do that. I was choosing to do that, right? You can just let it go, keep going, let it being thrown past you, don't react to it. And you can see that if you don't react to it, you will start to feel better. It's because it's your reaction that creates anxiety, that's why some people have one type of OCD, but they're like, how can this person have a different type of OCD? That just doesn't make sense, because you're choosing to react to this thought and not choosing to react to another thought. And this brings me to another question here too, that how do you know, why do you get a certain type of thought and not another type of thought? And this question I get asked all the time, and the only reason why you're getting your particular type of thought is because this topic is important to you in the way that this is your worst fear. So to you, because everybody is different, like we're all the same in a way, but we're also all different slightly in our values and in our value system, meaning that what's the worst possible thing for one person is not the worst possible thing for another person. So on your scale, say for example, the driving OCD and driving over somebody would be worse for you than say something bad happening to your family. Driving over a stranger would be worse for you than something happening to your family, right? So you will get this type of OCD. Now, another person will be like, well, something happening to my family is worse than the stranger, And this is kind of like a morbid conversation a little bit, but this I'm just trying to explain to you how OCD works, and this works on like a subconscious level. So you're not even experiencing these thoughts consciously, but the other person will say, "No, my family's health is more important than the stranger's health, so I worry about that. That's the worst that can happen for me." You know, so they will have a different type of OCD, maybe something like something to do with their family getting hurt. It's all about the underlying fear, not about the thought, not about how you feel and all of this kind of stuff. It's the underlying fear that's why you're having OCD. What is the worst outcome of this fear? That you will lose everything, and everything being what? Because usually people with OCD worry that they'll lose everything, but everything is different to everybody. So everything could be money, everything could be family, everything could be freedom, like go to jail, stuff like that. Everything could be health, right? So whatever that means to you, that's why you are zeroed in on this type of thought, you know? And when you start to understand that all of this is a mechanism, all of this is just kind of a mechanism that's gone wrong. It's not real. It's not it doesn't have power over you. It's like a clock. It's like a clock that's going that's working incorrectly. All we have to do is reset it, and by resetting I mean letting go of the reassurance, because by reassurance you're keeping that clock going the same way. Because your brain keeps throwing these thoughts at you, basically asking you, is this still dangerous? And you're like, yeah, it's still dangerous. I'm still going to pay attention to it. Still going to seek reassurance. Still going to keep it going, right? And I was the same way, right? And that's what keeps the thought going. And it can be for years that this thought goes like this. So you have to power down and say, from now on, no more. This is the same thought I've had for years, for months, for whatever. Nothing has ever turned out yet. So I'm not going to worry about it now all of a sudden being true. I'm choosing not to pay attention to it. I'm choosing to move on from it. I'm done. And powering through like that. And I mean, you're going to have bad days. Expect to have bad days. I haven't as you know, I help people all the time, and, basically talking to people weekdays, weekends, every day. And usually the progression is 7 to 3. So seven steps forward, 3 steps back. That's a good progression, because obviously everybody strives for just moving forward in the recovery, right? But sometimes 70-30, basically, when it comes to the doing the right thing versus doing the wrong thing. So most of the time they do the right thing, but especially in the beginning people slip a lot and say, oh, oops, I went and did the reassurance. And that's fine, as long as you learn from it and you don't keep the reassurance going, and then you just kind of dust yourself off and keep going with the refusing to do the reassurance. So, and with reassurance, the worst one, the hardest one to get rid of is self-reassurance. So that means, analyzing, staying in your room, staying in your house, not leaving, not doing anything, just thinking about the thought over and over and over again. Because every time you engage yourself like this, every time you think about the thought in depth like this, it's like you're saying that the thought is very important and you need to pay attention to it. That's the message you are sending to your brain. So your brain thinks, okay, the thought is very important. Let me pay more attention to it. Let me send it to you again. And then it sends it to you again, and then the cycle just gets worse and worse every time. So that's why it's very, very important for you to basically stop reacting that way. It's monumental to the recovery. I mean, that is the recovery. How do you recover? That's how you recover. And that's what I teach people in the sessions, is that I mean, you can't recover in a different way. I can be here to support you, but ultimately you have to do the right things every time. And I'm finding that it really helps if you do have somebody, not me, not kind of trying to sell myself or anything like that, but you do need somebody in the moment. So say, for example, if you're in a situation where say you're about to check something, right? And right in that moment, if you can find somebody Again, you can do this with me in the recovery program, or just finding a family member who's willing to do that with you. And you can turn to them and say, okay, I am in this moment. What am I supposed to do? You know? And the family member has to be trained in this stuff so they know what the right things to say, and to not allow you to do the avoidance or the reassurance or the compulsion, depending on your situation. But in that moment, because that first moment is what really sets the tone for everything else. If you react correctly in the moment, meaning, refuse the reassurance and just kind of keep going, move on, you will feel better. You might feel a little bit anxious for a little while, but it will go away, and then the next thought will get lighter. But the other way, that if you react very kind of deeply with a lot of anxiety, with a lot of emotion in the moment, you're setting yourself up for more in the future. So having somebody there that says, you're not doing the right thing, you need to be doing this, this, and this right when the situation hits, I find that's paramount, and having them kind of almost like on speed dial, at least for the first little while you're getting used to these behaviors. Because, afterwards it's too late. And this is my biggest pet peeve with the psychiatrists and psychologists. You're seeing them once a week. What good does that do, honestly? Like, I do have a once a week package for myself, like in my own recovery program as well. But that's only for people who have already kind of started to do the right things and are kind of well on their way in the recovery situation. But for most people, they're not ready for that. They need help right away, on the spot help. They don't need help 5 days from the situation, when they've already been doing reassurance and avoidance and all of this kind of stuff. So that's why I find it ineffective, and I think that's why my recovery program is so effective, is because it is in the moment. So anyways, so anytime you get a thought, if it has to do with your theme, if it's repetitive, if it gives you anxiety, if you had the same type of thought before and it's just like a variation of it, like a slight variation, all of this means that this is OCD. Now, from time to time, your OCD will throw you a completely new thought that you've never had before, so don't think that makes a difference of whether the thought is OCD or not. But if it follows this criteria, basically it is an OCD thought, and you need to react as if it's an OCD thought. Refuse the avoidance, refuse the reassurance, refuse the compulsions, and then move on. And it's going to be difficult, and you're going to have a hard time, but keep it going. Just the act of you trying to do this makes a difference in how your mind views this thought, because up until now it viewed it as extremely important if you weren't doing any of these things, right? So it viewed it as extremely important. Now that you are going to refuse, it's going to say, okay, well, this person is refusing, maybe it's not as important as all that, and going to send the thought a little bit less to you. And then you say, okay, I'm going to still ignore it. And your mind starts to actually change. And it's an actual physical change. This is not something metaphysical or, mumbo jumbo. This is a real thing. And scans, like medical scans, show that the mind actually changes. The neural pathways change how they interpret information. So when it comes to these thoughts, next time you get an exposure, basically being exposed to this type of situation, you're going to have a much easier time, because there's nothing here to hold on to, basically. So that's kind of the thing, and that's the trick of the recovery. That just kind of letting go, and every single time using every single moment as an exposure. You have OCD right now, use it as an exposure. Show your brain what it's supposed to do. It doesn't know. It needs you to show it. And if you're doing reassurance, you're showing it the wrong stuff, so you're confusing your brain further. So pull out of it, start showing it the right things, and it's going to start to follow you. I'm telling you, eventually your brain will follow what you're doing and will help you instead of going against you. So I guess this is the end of the show. If you guys have any more questions, please email me. Right now we're doing every Wednesday 8 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. And you can email me to info@youhaveocd.com. Just clearly label if you would like the question read on air or not. And I mean, I'm going to be kind of vague about it anyway, so you're not going to be exposed or anything like that. Also, if you would like to just ask me a question privately, you can do so and just let me know again that it's a private question and I can reply to you in email. I do encourage you to allow me to do it in Q&A, just because most people do have the same questions, and you know, sometimes I might overlook something or not say something and until I get a question on that specific topic. So it's good to kind of mention everything. If you go to youhaveocd.com, you can find my recovery program there. There's some books there for sale, as well as a lot of free information. So please do check that out. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you next Wednesday.